Hello and welcome. This is Talking in Spirals.
For most of the time, we're kind of spiraling. I'm Brennan.
And I'm Maria.
We're your co hosts. We're both full time content creators and long distance friends.
Thanks for joining us as we talk about all of our interests, everything from sustainability to slow and simple living, minimalism, and lots of other fun stuff.
With a generous helping of chaos thrown in most of the time. It's happening. It's happening. We have a podcast. We're two people talking on two mics. We have a podcast now.
And we're in two different places, two different states.
Yeah, on opposite sides of the country. Pretty wild. No one asked for this. Here we are. This is the Talking in Spirals podcast. And if you couldn't guess by the name, there's going to be talking and there's going to be spiraling.
Upward or downward? Who knows?
Any direction, all directions, spiraling all over the place. Talking all over the place.
Unscripted.
Very obviously so. My name is Brennan.
And hi, I'm Maria.
And we're your co-hosts of this podcast.
We enjoy talking a lot about slow living on the internet. We're both full-time content creators.
And we are long-distance internet friends. We did meet in person one time for about 2 hours.
In July, we went to Planta. So good.
Yes. We ate some vegan food. I crashed your honeymoon. Quite literally crashed your honeymoon.
It was great.
I had a great time at that romantic dinner.
You, me, and my husband.
Just the three of us. So I guess we should introduce ourselves. No pressure. Panics. Panics. The panic that just, your eyes just glazed over. Hi, my name is Brennan, and this is my voice. Just so you can tell our voices apart, this is my voice, and this is what I sound like all the time. This is not weird or uncomfortable or awkward at all. This is my voice all the time.
And hello, I'm Maria. This is what my voice sounds like, just so you don't get the two of us confused. I'm based out of Buffalo, New York, where it is snowing like 6 months out of the year, and it's always cold.
And I am based in South Florida, where it is humid and hot almost all of the time, and it never snows.
So a little bit about me. I live with my husband and a cat named Waffles and a lab puppy named Pepper. I started as a full-time content creator in this past June, but I started living planet friendly in January of 2022. So I've been doing this for what will be 2 years. I actually went to school for journalism, creative writing, photography, and graphic design. Prior to this, I worked as a journalist and a graphic designer for a nonprofit, but now I'm kind of using all of those skills to build and manage my brand, and I'm a lot happier now.
That's very important to note. She is a lot happier now. So I've been creating content on my platform, which is Brennan Kai, just my name, not as interesting or fun as Living Planet Friendly. I've been doing it since 2020. So I lost my job due to the pandemic. I was working in the wellness industry. I have a lot of opinions on that, and we're going to talk about it in some future episodes because we have some hot takes that I think are pretty valid and interesting and, yeah, just offer some different perspectives. So I was working in the wellness industry and I was laid off due to COVID, and I started making sustainability focused content in the summer of 2020. I was originally part of one of the first rounds of creators that TikTok supported in making educational content because they were trying to pivot away from being an app known for teenagers doing dance routines, and they were trying to put out more education-based content. I applied because I was gainfully unemployed at the time. And I got in and I was accepted, and I was under contract with them for the rest of 2020, just creating sustainability focused videos. And I gained a following doing that. And I reached a point where I realized I actually really enjoyed doing it, and I didn't want to start looking for quote unquote real jobs again. So in 2021, I started to take the business more seriously, and I started to diversify and really kind of commit to doing this full time. And in 2022, Maria and I both signed with our agency that we love very much. And we kind of connected prior to that, but we've just kind of over the years had a lot of shared experiences. Being in this field is pretty isolating. You have to sort of build your own community.
It's very lonely.
Yeah, it can be very lonely. And there's a lot of questions and concerns that you would normally have coworkers or a boss to go to with and kind of discuss. And Maria and myself and a lot of the other content creators in our field that we're friends with didn't have any of that. So we decided to kind of create it for ourselves. And we started having weekly meetings where everybody got together and kind of talked about what we were all doing for work, and not just work, but just personal stuff and kind of things we're interested in. And we started having some really good conversations. That was probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that was 2 years ago now, which is very weird to say because we've been having weekly meetings for so long.
Maria and the rest of the creators that are in those meetings really do feel like my coworkers.
Yeah, because I mean, in this job, we have our personal managers and our management team, but we don't really have a set of coworkers like you would at any other job. So it's nice to have a small community where we can chat, and it's been very beneficial to have a group of creators who are going through the same sorts of professional problems and things like that.
And we just inherently, because we're both in such a niche space, which is like sustainability, minimalism, that sort of thing, we very much inherently have a lot in common. So the conversations are always interesting and funny and just really nice. They just feel comfortable. So we're going to record them now.
So we want to start every podcast with something a little light and fun. So Brennan, what is your hyperfixation recipe at the moment?
That's a great question. My current hyperfixation recipe is a depression cake.
What kind of depression cake are we talking?
Okay. So, it could be whatever kind of depression cake you want. But in this context, a depression cake is a recipe that was very popular during the Great Depression when it was really hard to access things like butter, milk, and eggs. And it was very common to make cakes out of exclusively shelf stable ingredients. Sometimes they're also referred to as wacky cakes, which is fun, but so is depression cake. They're both fun. Basically, they're just made of shelf stable ingredients. They have like 8 ingredients. And my current favorite thing is having a bunch of people over last minute to have a fire in my backyard. And when I don't have any food to make, or I don't have a dessert or anything, I know I can always throw together a depression cake, and they're always a hit. It's just like a plain chocolate cake with a simple icing. I put some peanut butter in the icing, but it's killer. Anyways,
I love that.
What is your current hyperfixation food?
I've been making sourdough discard biscuits every like 3 days.
Send me the recipe ASAP.
I will. It is so good. They're so flaky and they're buttery. They remind me of like Cracker Barrel biscuits.
Oof.
They did get like more stale quicker than like normal biscuits would, but you pop it in the microwave for 10 seconds, add a little bit of butter, and it's amazing.
For some context, Maria is the queen of sourdough. Just the queen of sourdough. Like, I got a sourdough starter like 2 months ago, and I'm trying to get on her level, and I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. Okay. But a lot of our relationship is literally just texting about bread.
You send me pictures of your bread and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like texting about like different hydration levels. Like, it's so boring for 99.9% of the population.
But I love it. I love it though. There's so much included in sourdough. I feel like we could have a 4-hour episode just talking about sourdough.
Coming soon. I should add that one of my current hyperfixations is sourdough discard pancakes, specifically the Farmhouse on Boone recipe, because it's insane.
I have to make it.
It's so easy, dude. You would love it. It's literally just discard and like a handful of ingredients. Like, you don't add more flour.
I've made them before and I want to say I add like butter and like salt and like random ingredients with it. But I also just kind of came up with that out of my butt, so I should follow a recipe.
It's like a really easy recipe. I make it like 3 times a week, and I keep them in the fridge and just heat them up.
I'm more of a like bake with sourdough and then leave it in the bread box, but I'm trying to integrate more sourdough into like my everyday cooking.
That sounds good to me. Why are we doing a podcast?
Because we like talking.
We like talking. We like spiraling. Both of us are full-time sustainability sort of focused eco content creators. And we're both with the same agency. We both do this for a living, mostly short form video content. And we have a lot of shared interests professionally and personally. And we both create a lot of content about slow living, sustainability, minimalism, stuff like that. That is like both of our main focus. A lot of stuff in the climate space, which is, I guess, kind of loosely the space that we are both in, is very kind of cut and dry and pretty.
Almost like doomish.
Yes, it can be like not fun to listen to or read about. How dare you? I'm going to hit the leave button if you cough one more time. If you hate this, I'm so sorry. This is what it is. This is what it's going to be.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Glad you're here.
We love to have you. Personally, I think that there needs to be more long form, unscripted content on the topics that we're into because I look for it and I don't find it. So, just like with everything else that Maria and I think needs to be in the world but isn't, we just do it ourselves. So, that's what's happening right now.
And it's really nice to have a place where we can speak freely and unfiltered, and that's not overly edited like a lot of our content is. And you'll get to know us a little bit more through our podcast.
We've both discussed listening to podcasts that were more climate focused, that were very dense and stiff and a little bit more structured, more science based. And I do listen to podcasts like that, but I also like a cozy comfort listen that just feels like friends talking. So that's what this is going to be.
And we've had these conversations probably over the last year and a half where we've talked about we should start a podcast because we have these conversations day to day, and we want to invite you to listen in on it.
And a lot of the content that we create is short form content, and it's scripted, and at least a lot of it is, and it's very much like edited to 30-second clips.
There's only so much that we can fit into a minute-long short content posting once a day.
Exactly. And so much context is lost. Like you get comments that are like, but what about this? Like so much whataboutism. And this is a format where it can just be a more natural conversation where there's more context, there's more nuance, which is something that's very much lacking in sustainability spaces. Nuance. And we can talk about that until we're blue in the face, and we do. So
Yep.
That's what this is. Two friends talking about our shared interests. And if that's something that you're into, please follow along and subscribe. And there's more of this to come. We are doing a full season. You will have an episode of this podcast twice a month until the spring.
How did you get into slow living in general?
That's a good question. I'll try to keep it brief, but that's not really my strong suit, if you know me at all. So I was born in a small town in Florida called St. Augustine, and I grew up there. My parents were both pretty environmentally focused. Like my dad is a lifelong surfer, does some surf photography, and he was a photojournalist and very much invested in the climate movement from a very early, from my perspective, an early time. I actually grew up pescatarian in the South in the 90s, which is pretty nuts. It's pretty fringe at the time. It was not very normal. My mom was a high school art teacher. She's now an art history professor. I'm an only child, and my parents were just really invested in exposing me to a lot of nature, a lot of outdoor activities. We traveled a lot. I'm very, very fortunate. I had a pretty incredible childhood. I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth, but we got to experience a lot of things. Everything that I did growing up was very nature focused. A lot of my experiences were very environmentalism forward. And I'm so grateful for that. I was actually born on Earth Day, which is just a weird coincidence. And you will see that in a lot of my content. I've kind of like branded myself as the girl born on Earth Day, which is, it's funny. So it was like always a part of me innately to be concerned about these things, to care about these things. And I'm really grateful for my upbringing in that way. And then when I graduated from high school, I applied for an exchange program and I was accepted to go on a foreign exchange for 1 year. And I did not get to select where I was going. It was one of 30 countries that I could have been sent to. And I got sent to a small village in northern Germany outside of Hamburg on the North Sea. I was coming from having grown up in Florida, and I'm very lucky to have traveled quite a bit as a kid, but it was a really unique experience to kind of be on this one-way plane to this small remote area in a very cold, dark climate. Yes, I do have seasonal depression. Thank you for asking. I did learn that. in 2013. And I just met some of the most amazing people I've ever known in my entire life, which are my closest friends to this day from that were other exchange students at the time. And I lived with a German family and just kind of got more immersed. And I started to learn that even though I'd always considered myself an environmentalist, I was unaware that the United States, in so many ways, does not offer any infrastructure to set us up for success as it relates to sustainability and just quality of life. But that's a whole different conversation. But I realized that when I was living in northern Germany, there is so much more infrastructure in place to allow German citizens to live a more sustainable and environmentally friendly life, to live a more simple, minimalist life, in my opinion. And it really opened my eyes. I would say it radicalized me a little bit. And then when my visa expired, I moved to Miami, which is a really big, kind of chaotic city. I lived there for 8 years. And that's where I was living on my own for the first time, kind of like living independently as an adult. I went to Florida International University and I got a degree in sociology and international relations. And as I was living on my own, in Miami, I started to realize that I could make more sustainable changes within my life. I was very discouraged by the culture of hyper consumerism that exists in Miami. And that's not the only culture that exists in Miami. Miami is a beautiful, vibrant place, but that is kind of mainstream. And it was upsetting to me as someone who cares very much about my carbon footprint and my consumption habits. So I really wanted to scale back and do my part. And that's when I started living like a low waste lifestyle. I went vegan. I'm no longer as low waste as I used to be. I'm no longer as vegan as I used to be. But that's when this journey kind of started. And I started becoming really interested in individual impact and community organizing and all of the above. And the rest is history. Was that enough rambling for you?
Yeah, I think you covered everything.
Your turn. How did you get started in this whirlwind space that is sustainability, slow living, all of the above? We never know what to call it, for the record, for the listeners. We never know how to phrase what we're doing.
I started in this, well, let me back up. I only started to notice what was happening with our planet in the early 2010s. We took a family trip to California to see Sequoia National Park. And right around then, there were some wildfires and I always kind of noticed the trash on the sidewalk and things like that, but it never hit home until I saw firsthand what was happening. In 2017, I was a sophomore in college and I started having a lot of different issues with allergies, and it kind of catapulted my journey into a more holistic lifestyle, but not crazy holistic. I never got to be a crazy holistic person.
Coming in episode 2.
But I developed allergies and sensitivities to preservatives, pesticides, artificial colorings, which, if you step a foot in American grocery stores, that's about 99% of what's on the shelves.
That's so hard to avoid.
It has been a several year long process to get to where I am today. But at that same time, when I was cutting out almost all artificial foods, I was taking climate science courses in college and learning about all the impacts of climate change. I started to do research to see what I can actually do that will make a difference. Although I started making eco-friendly swaps in high school, I formally adopted a low-waste lifestyle in college and have been living a low-waste life since then. Through my climate science courses, I learned it's not just all about eco-friendly swaps. You can switch to a bamboo toothbrush, but is that really having as much of an impact as other things do in the community? So,
It's not that simple. Like, there are layers to these issues, and we will talk more about that on this podcast because that's something that we're both very passionate about.
yeah, sustainable living is
Nuance.
very nuanced.
Nuance within sustainability. It's everything. It's very important.
And I think there was a shift about maybe in 2020, 2021, where it became less about sticking trash in a jar and more about activism in your communities and how that's really going to help solve the climate crisis. So,
Oh man, the trash in the jar. We all went through that phase.
oh God. There are still people that do that online.
And more power to them. I have become more aware of the fact that it's not a one size fits all approach. You don't have to have a jar full of trash to consider yourself an environmentalist.
Yeah, there's a business owner in the sustainability community that does during Plastic Free July, their family's trash fits in a jar. And I think it's a very great small term to kind of open your eyes to what you're throwing out. And I think that the entire movement has switched to more imperfect living and perfect environmentalism. And that's been the most beneficial thing for the entire sustainability movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when there's not as much of a barrier to entry, more people do feel like, hey, I can do this. I can start with a small change. I can be more mindful in my consumption habits. And you know that quote. You know that quote. We don't need, I'm going to butcher it. We don't need a handful of people living zero waste perfectly. We need millions doing it imperfectly. Thank you, Anne Marie Bonneau, the zero waste chef, the OG.
That is so true, though. And I don't know if you have the same experience, but whenever somebody comments on one of my posts saying, I made this small swap today, or this video inspired me to do this differently today, that is incredible and makes me feel like I'm actually doing a difference. And
It's the most rewarding thing.
it truly is.
Seriously. So I feel like we should talk about a lot of your content is food focused, as is mine. I'm kind of trying to diversify a bit, as are you, but a lot of people that follow us or watch what we make are interested in the food aspect of it. Well, you already mentioned that you, for allergy reasons, you have to make a lot of your own food from scratch. That has the added benefit of creating less trash. It's cheaper, you know what's going in your body. It's sometimes more health forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I started in the beginning of this year participating in the trend of homemade kitchen restocks.
And then I jumped on the trend because I was obsessed with your videos.
It's a great trend. And I think every video I post, I have at least 10 people in the comments on any platform saying, I'm making more things from scratch. I'm doing more of this. And they don't even realize the effect that they have. Because when you buy less processed things, you might buy more ingredients. It might be a touch more expensive in some cases, but for the most part, it's not. It's way less expensive. There's not as much plastic packaging. Like, we haven't bought bread in a plastic bag in a year. All of those bags that we've saved over the year add up.
Neither have I because you inspired me.
I mean, bread making is just a great hobby to pick up, and it's definitely my hyperfixation.
It's definitely my hyperfixation at the moment. But I will say another thing is, and this is something that doesn't get spoken about as much, but like the movement of slow living, doing things with your hands, getting back to basics. I mean, we always say when we're just having a conversation about it that at the end of the day, it's just going back to what your grandparents were doing. How did your grandparents do things before we had all these modern conveniences? And that's not to say that you shouldn't use modern conveniences. Like, we're modern people and we enjoy modernity. Obviously, we're literally talking into mics right now. Like, I'm not trying to be a pilgrim. But at the same time, there, in my opinion, with my like background in sociology, it's something I'm interested in. There has been over the past couple of years like this movement of people, I would say within our demographic, getting more interested in learning these kind of lost skills. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's fascinating to me. I think one of the reasons is, like you mentioned, I mean, there's so many. Like you mentioned, it's more environmentally friendly. It's more health friendly for those people with allergies or food intolerances or anything like that. But also, just of course, like I don't need to tell you how many unnecessary additives are in most processed foods.
It's scary.
They're fine from time to time. Yes, it is scary. They're fine from time to time. You will catch me eating Starburst. Like, I am not a purist by any stretch of the imagination. And we have episodes planned in the future where we will talk about our mentality as it relates to food and diet and everything, and like having a variety of foods in your diet and not being restrictive, etc. But for the most part, there's tons of benefits to adopting a more slow living approach to your household, whether it's from food or the way you clean. But one of the benefits that I don't hear people talking about that often is just how much it helps me to do things with my hands that are not digital. Just there's something so therapeutic and beneficial about shaping a loaf of dough with my hands, about spending a night in my house by myself doing a homemade kitchen restock where I'm prepping food, you know, versus sitting in front of a screen, which is what most of us are doing most of the time.
I would say we didn't grow up as iPad kids. I would say that's more Gen Z.
We're like the last generation.
We're the last generation where when I was 8, my mother was telling us to go play outside instead of watch TV.
Me too. I came home when it got dark out. It was like, come home when it gets dark.
Exactly.
I don't think kids have that now.
No, and I think that all of these people that are going back to the basics are in the millennial age group that are realizing we didn't grow up with all this level of overconsumption and all of this technology in our faces 24/7. And sometimes we have to step back, especially you and I in this career where most of our job is digital work, editing, posting, interacting with people. So being able to spend 4 hours in my kitchen just making things and doing things not related to anything technological, not related to scrolling or anything like that is huge.
It's like it grounds me.
Yeah.
And I will say we should speak to this, like, because I'm sure people will. I get this in my comments a lot. People saying this is a privilege.
Absolutely.
This is very privileged that you're able to do that. And that is true. The lifestyle that both of us live, which I don't think is like a radical lifestyle by any means, but it is a privilege to be able to have, to be able to take the time to cook from scratch. This is our full-time job, both of us.
Yep.
And has been for many years. So we are able to do that in a way that a lot of people are not. We also don't have children. Neither one of us has kids. And that changes things. So it is a privilege to be able to live this way. But at the same time, one could argue that it's a privilege to not live this way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's cultures all across the world that live a quote unquote slow lifestyle because they quite literally have no other resources available to them.
Yeah.
They live off of the land. That is how so many native populations have literally sustained life for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So there's a lot of opinions, but I have felt nothing but benefits to my life since I've started to simplify, kind of take more minimalist principles into my day-to-day life, make more things with my hands, consume less, be more mindful, and focus on sustainability. So that's just our experience. So that's what we're spiraling about right now.
We're spiraling
Yeah, we are.
all the time.
All the time. Sometimes with a microphone in front of us, but other times when we're just like alone staring at the ceiling. This is more fun.
It's more fun spiraling with somebody else as opposed to just spiraling alone.
The real spiral was the friends we made along the way.
We need that on on a sign.
Merch. Merch. First episode, already making merch.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode.
Thank you to all of our incredible listeners. Hi, Mom. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed today's episode, just follow, like, give us a review.
Be sure to connect with us on socials. All of the links will be in the episode description.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye. I think we nailed it.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Listens back later. They did not nail it.